All right, let's dive into the story of RethinkDB. This is a database that was built from the ground up to power the real-time web. And trust me, it's a fascinating look at a piece of tech that really, truly rethought how we should be handling data. So, let me just start with a question that gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. What if, instead of your app constantly having to ask the database for new stuff, the database just told you the second something changed? It sounds simple, but that one powerful idea is exactly what made RethinkDB so revolutionary. To really appreciate just how big of a deal this was, we got to rewind a little bit. We have to understand the problem they were trying to solve, and that means looking at the old, kind of clunky way of getting fresh data. Yeah, this is a process called polling, and you can just imagine your app is like an impatient kid in the backseat of a car asking the database over and over again. Anything new yet? How about now? Anything new? It's not just annoying, it's super inefficient, it wastes resources, and there's always a lag. For the kind of real-time apps we expect today, that just was not going to cut it. Okay, and this is where the story gets really interesting. Because the folks behind RethinkDB, well, they didn't actually start out trying to fix this exact problem. But a really crucial pivot in their thinking changed absolutely everything. So you've got the founders, Slava Akhmashat and Michael Glukovsky. They originally set out to build something else entirely. But while they were working, they kept seeing developers just struggling, wrestling with these super complex setups, message queues, caching layers, the whole shebang, just to make a simple feature update live on a screen. And they had a light bulb moment. The real problem, the real pain point for developers, wasn't just scaling a database, it was how ridiculously hard it was to build an app that felt alive. And their entire journey was a reaction to that realization. They founded the company in 2009, and then they made this incredibly bold move to pivot their whole architecture. They threw out the traditional relational model and went all in on a flexible JSON-based document model, all designed for one thing, making real-time totally effortless. And by the time they launched in 2013, you better believe the developer community was ready and waiting for it. Okay, so let's get into the magic. Let's talk about the core innovation that made RethinkDB so incredibly special. It's a feature that just completely changed the whole conversation between an app and its database. It's called a change feed. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a subscription, right? Instead of constantly checking the news website for a news story, you just subscribe, and the headlines get pushed to your phone the second they're published. A change feed is literally that, but for your data. I mean, the difference is just night and day. On one side, you have that constant, noisy, inefficient chatter of polling, always asking, always checking. And on the other, you have this clean, elegant push model. It's built on just listening. This was a complete game changer for speed and efficiency. And this quote it nails the feeling at the time. For developers who had spent years writing tangled, complicated code just to try and fake real-time behavior, RethinkDB felt like actual magic. It just solved this huge, annoying problem right inside the database itself. But of course, change feeds were just one piece of a really well-designed puzzle. RethinkDB was also a modern, document-based database, so it was super flexible. It was built to be distributed from day one, which means it could scale out easily. And it had this beautiful query language called Requeue that developers just fell in love with because it was so clear and powerful. So you have this powerful new tool. What did people actually do with it? Let's take a look at how all this cool tech actually translated into real-world applications.
And the use cases are pretty much exactly what you'd imagine for a database like this. We're talking about live analytics dashboards where charts and graphs just update themselves. Or think about collaborative apps like Google Docs, where you can see your coworkers' cursors moving around. It was perfect for chat apps, obviously, and for big networks of IoT devices, all streaming in sensor data.
So yeah, the common thread here is pretty simple. It's all about immediacy. If your app's whole reason for being is that users need to see changes the absolute instant they happen, then RethinkDB was the perfect tool for the job. But RethinkDB didn't exist in a vacuum. So where did it fit in with everything else that was out there? Understanding the competition really helps put its unique contribution into perspective.
This table really lays it all out. You had services like Firebase that also did real-time, for sure, and you could kind of rig something similar in a traditional database like PostgreSQL, but RethinkDB's big advantage was how native and elegant it was. Real-time wasn't just a feature they bolted on, it was its whole reason for existing.
And that beautiful query language just made it so simple to use.
And that's really what made people love it so much. It wasn't just powerful, it was the whole developer experience. It was open source, it was thoughtfully designed, and for the specific problem it set out to solve, it just worked. Now, here's the bittersweet part of the story. The commercial company behind RethinkDB did eventually shut down, but its story doesn't end there. Not at all. Because it was open source, the technology itself kept going, maintained by the community. And maybe even more importantly, its core idea, the push-based database, has had a huge influence on how we all think about building modern apps today.
And that really brings us to the final thought, doesn't it? The next time you're using a collaborative app, or you see a live sports score update on its own, or watch a stock ticker move, it's worth taking a second to ask how much of that seamless, instant magic is standing on the shoulders of RethinkDB's simple, elegant, and revolutionary idea.